In today's session, we'll talk about users. Okay, users in Fusion applications. Fusion applications. So when I talk about EBS, we know how to manage the users. It's all about we'll create the user from sysadmin, and the user require access to which responsibilities those you can assign, and any setups you want to perform, you can perform directly if you have access to the relevant responsibility, if the responsibility has access to relevant functions. But in the Fusion, there are certain conditions in terms of user creation as well as in terms of setups. Not many setups, few setups. We'll see what are those. So in Fusion applications, users are classified into two types: implementation user. The other user is employee user. Employee user and implementation user. How to create the employee user? If you want to create employee user, what are the prerequisites? Okay, what are the prerequisites we require to create the employee user? So we have to set up our business unit and legal entity ready. To complete the business unit setup, we have to complete primary ledger also. Okay. Or else just no issues, this you can ignore. At the time of user creation, system won't look for that. Okay, primarily the business unit and legal entity we have to complete, the definitions we have to complete so that you can create the employee user. So what does it mean by employee user creation? Employee user creation is nothing but employee creation. Okay, we create employee, basic definition. For the same employee we create the user, that only we call as employee user. Employee user is nothing but we create employee. For the same employee we associate the username and all. In EBS what we do, we create employee in the sysadmin, and what are the, first we create user within the sysadmin, right? We create the user within the sysadmin responsibility or within the sysadmin application, and we create employee in the HRMS. The same employee we associate with the user. So here in Fusion, when you talk about employee user, we create employee user, employee. To the same employee we provide the username also, that only we call as employee user. If you want to create the employee user in the Fusion applications, we require business unit and legal entity. Without business unit and legal entity, you cannot create employee user. Okay, you cannot create employee user. If you don't create employee user, you cannot perform certain setups in the system also. What setups and all, we'll see that later. Okay, so from where we can create the employee user? Employee user you can create from HCM, Human Capital Management. Within the HCM, we have one task called as manage users. By using the task, we can create the employee user. Within the HCM, Human Capital Management, we have one task called as manage users. By using the task, we can create the employee user. If you want to create the employee user, first we have to complete all these setups. Done. So when we get access to fresh instance, we cannot create employee user. we cannot create employee user. The reason is, in the first instance, we cannot find required business units and legal entities. That is the reason. In the first instance, we cannot create employee user. With that reason, we create implementation user as a first user within the Fusion applications. Okay, we create implementation user. If you want to create the implementation user, no prerequisites. For employee user, these are the prerequisites. Without completing these business unit and legal entity, we cannot create employee user, but implementation user you can create. How to create implementation is very simple. We'll provide the name and we'll set the password. That's how implementation user can be ready. From where we can create implementation user? Implementation user you can create from security console. Okay, we can create from security console. From security console you can create the implementation user. So in the first instance, all the time we create implementation user only. The reason, we cannot create employee user. If you want to create employee user, we require business unit and a legal entity. So that is the reason we cannot. So the implementation user, whatever you are going to create with the help of security console, you can do all the setups. Let's take example of our financials. If you talk about financials implementation, with the help of implementation user, you can do all the setups related to financials except supplier sites. Being an implementation user, you cannot create the supplier sites. But being an employee user, you can create supplier sites. Here, let me list out. You can create supplier. You can create supplier, yes. Being an implementation user, you can create supplier and supplier address. Yes, we can create supplier address and supplier sites. No, we cannot create supplier site assignments. We have to assign supplier site to business unit. In EBS, we assign supplier site to operating unit, right? This we cannot perform. But being a employee user, you can do all this. So this is how we have a functionality. So why we cannot create supplier sites and site assignments? What Oracle did is, only employee only can do this site creations and site assignments to relevant business units. That sort of condition we have within the Fusion applications. So here, if you have an employee user can create supplier sites and the same sites can be assigned to a business unit. Again, directly employee user cannot create supplier sites and site assignments. The employee user need to be converted as a procurement agent. The first point is, the user should be a employee user. The employee should be a procurement agent. That means only procurement agent can create supplier sites and site assignments. Who can act as a procurement agent? Only employee can be converted as a procurement agent. So that means the employee user can do any setups within the application based on the roles which we are going to assign, and only employee user can create supplier sites and site assignments. This is related to financials. If we talk about procurement or say purchasing application, within the purchasing, The only procurement agent can create requisitions, purchase orders, and other definitions. Okay, so once we get into that, when you create the procurement agent definition, at the time you can see the detailed information. But when I talk about finance implementation, this is the point we have to understand related to users. Which user cannot create supplier sites and assignments, and which user can create supplier sites and site assignments, and what is the reason? What is the reason employee user can create supplier sites and site assignment? The employee user only can be converted as a procurement agent. We cannot convert implementation user as a procurement agent. Okay, implementation user cannot be converted as a procurement agent. If employee user, implementation user can be converted as a procurement agent, even implementation user also can create sites, but not possible. So this is the difference we have to understand between these two user types when you are dealing with a fresh instance. To start with the configuration, you have to create first implementation user, then you'll complete one by one setup. Once you are ready with the business unit and legal entity, then you can create employee user. You have option to convert implementation user as employee user, or else you can create employee user separately. Okay, but only the point is you may create employee user directly, or you may convert implementation user as employee user. That only you can do if business unit and legal entities are ready. So this is a point we have to understand. Implementation user in the sense the user which we create, okay, at the time of setup. When you are going to kickstart the system setup, we create implementation user. We cannot create employee users. The reason, in fresh instance, you don't find any BUs and LUs. Those we have to create as per the business requirement. Only the option is implementation user. With the help of implementation user, you can complete the setups. Once you are ready with the setups called BU and legal entity, you can create the employee user. So this is what we have to understand about implementation user and employee user, the difference. Any questions on the same, please?
Laxman, when implementation, when an implementation user is converted into the employee user, that is after the definition of business unit and legal entity, would he be able to assign the supplier sites and site address?
Yes. Once you convert implementation user as employee user, you have to convert the same employee user as a procurement agent. Okay. Satish, to create this, please go on mute. When you are asking the question, you can just unmute. After your question, you can go on mute. Sometimes we may get background noise. Please. Yeah. So we discussed one point. To create the sites and site assignments, the user should be an employee user, and the same user we have to convert as a procurement agent. If you convert implementation user as an employee user, the same employee user we have to convert as a procurement agent, so that the implementation user also will be able to perform these setups. But once you convert implementation user as employee user, then we don't call that user as implementation user. Since we converted as employee, we call as employee user only.
Hello, Laxman. Hello, I have a question. This procurement agent, is it a type of employee user, like, or is it a role or something like that? This procurement agent.
That is a setup.
And the other question
setup.
Okay, it is a setup. Okay, and the other question is, once you convert an implementation user into an employee user, can we again change that employee user back to implementation user, or no?
You cannot undo. You cannot undo that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions here, please?
Laxman, what is the difference between, you said like for employee user, you need to have the business unit and legal entity.
Yeah, to create.
Implementation user, you said like you are going to create from the security console.
Correct.
So where would the employee user be created from?
Employee user can be created from here. I mentioned that HCM, human capital management. In EBS, we create employee in HRMS, right?
Yeah.
The HRMS application here you can see as HCM, human capital management, which consists of HR, payroll, options, talent, different applications. Okay.
But in order to create a user, I mean, normally in HCM, in order to create a user, you need to have business unit and legal entity, right? Mandate?
No, not required.
Any user.
Not required. Not required.
Oh, this is required only to define site. Oh, I'm just trying to understand the difference between a normal user versus employee user.
Yeah. Yeah, tell me your question. See here, simple point. Implementation user you create from security console, that is clear. If you want to create employee user, we have to create from HCM. Okay, HCM, we use one task called as manage users. By using this task, you can create employee user from HCM. You may not implement HCM for your client. Still, you can create employee user. Okay, the shared service in EBS also, even if you don't implement HRMS, still you can create the basic employee definition. The same applicable in the Fusion also.
How would you differentiate between a user and employee user? Normal user and
that I'll show you in the system. When you see the parameters, you can understand. By seeing the parameters, you can understand. When you go to implementation user, you don't see person number and there won't be any BU association to implementation user. If you check the employee record, you can find the person number and you find the business unit assignment to that employee user, the records.
okay. So when you say business unit, then the procurement agent can assign only the supplier side for that particular business unit, right? Not other units again.
Exactly. That point we'll discuss when we are doing that. So again, those conditions, it may not be good to discuss now. Yes, since you are asking, yes, that is true. Only to that business unit.
Laxman, can I ask a question?
Please.
Okay, there are several implementations that necessarily don't have HCM implemented. Like, they may have a third party like Workday or
Correct.
ADP. So in that cases, there are several organizations who bring in the employee information via an interface or an import into Oracle.
Correct.
I want to believe that you will address this sometime later, and I'm
no, if that is the case,
sorry if I'm jumping the gun, but I want to be that. Go ahead.
Yeah, please complete.
Go ahead, Mr. Laxman. Sorry.
No. I think I thought.
So my understanding is that sometime during the sessions or somehow you will talk about that scenario use case also, where we can import employee information from a third party system and convert them into employee user within Oracle for financial usage, because some of our implementation solely have only financial licenses, no HCM, nothing else, right? So in such cases, there will be several integrated systems from third party. I just want to make sure that scenario is valid for Fusion also as use case.
Yeah, still you can create employee users. Even if you are not going to take the subscription from Oracle for HCM, you are allowed to create employee users. But they don't allow you to perform the HCM related operations. Yeah.
Correct. That is correct. Yes. Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions here? Fine, no questions, but we'll create the employee user, implementation user at that time. It would be more clear for us. Just before getting to that, we are trying to understand very high level. Done. Now, the fresh instance, first we have to create the implementation user. When you create the implementation user, what are the roles we have to assign to that implementation user and what is the purpose? If you talk about EBS, in EBS, if you want to start with the fresh implementation, we need one responsibility called as system administrator. With the system administrator, we can start creating everything from the scratch. Based on the scope of the implementation, we can create the responsibilities, we can create the user, and we can assign that responsibility to the user. Then we can start with the multi-org configuration, location creation for business unit, then business group creation, business group creation, and we'll create one by one. Primary ledger, legal entities, operating unit, inventory organization. We'll set up the profile option. Then we can start with the module specific configuration, inventory setups, purchasing setups, APR, and all each and every application setups we complete. Okay, so that's how we do in case of EBS. But anything if you want to do as a part of implementation, you have to start from system administrator responsibility, right? Now, how the same we can do in the Fusion, we'll see. So when you create the implementation user, say we are going to create implementation user called as ERPTREE. If you create implementation user, so what are the roles we have to assign to this user? Primarily, we have to assign the 3 roles. Okay, we have to assign the 3 roles to the user who is going to act as a consultant, who required complete privileges to do any sort of configuration within the instance. Those roles are, always we assign job roles to the user. Yes, if required, we'll assign abstract roles also. Okay, so always we assign job roles to the user. We cannot assign duty roles to user directly. If required, we may assign abstract roles. Already discussed about data roles story. Fine. So which job roles we have to assign to the user? The roles are like application implementation consultant, application implementation consultant, IT security manager, and role called as employee. Okay, so these are the 3 roles we have to assign to implementation user. We have to create implementation user from security console, and we have to assign these 3 roles to the user. So what purpose, okay, what purpose we create these, we assign these 3 roles. If you assign application implementation consultant role to any user, that user can have access to FSM. Okay, the user can have access to FSM. FSM stands for Functional Setup Manager. With the help of Functional Setup Manager, what we can do? We can perform the setups. We can do many activities. After completing this, we are going to talk about FSM only, so there we can get more detailed information. Okay, now the simple point is, if you want to perform any application related setups, we need access to FSM. The Fusion applications, if you want to do any application related setup, that can be AP or AR, CM or FR, GL, you can name any application related configuration. If you want to do, we need access to FSM. How we can get access to FSM in the Fusion? By assigning application implementation consultant role. If you assign this application implementation consultant role to any user, that user can get connected to FSM so that user can perform the setups. Only for primarily setup purpose. So in EBS, what we do is, if you want to do AP setups, you have to switch to AP responsibility. You can do the AP related setups. If you want to do the GL setups, you have to be in the GL responsibility. If you want to do FA setups, you have to be in the FA responsibility. But in the Fusion, FSM is the centralized environment which allows us to do any application configuration. Okay, from single place you can do any application configuration. That is the purpose we use FSM. Fine. To do the setups in EBS, we have to be in the relevant responsibility so that we can complete the setups. But in the Fusion, By connecting to FSM, you can do any application related setups. In EBS, if you want to create the users and if you want to assign the responsibilities to the users, okay, of course, to create responsibilities only. If you want to create the users and if you want to create the responsibilities and to assign the responsibilities to the users and to create the custom menus, custom request groups, to perform all these, to set up the profile options, to do all these activities, we need access to system administrator responsibility. Similar activities if you want to perform, okay, so we need IT security manager. If you assign IT security manager role to any user, that user can have access to security console. The user can be connected to security console. With the help of security console, you can create the users and you can assign the roles to that users, or else you can create the custom roles and you can do everything. Okay, with the help of security console, you can create users and you can manage the users and you can assign the roles to the user and you can create the custom roles. Okay, the custom roles also you can associate with the users and you can manage the same. To manage the users and the roles, we need access to security console. So if you assign IT security manager role to any user, that user can connect to security console and they can act as a administrator related to users and the roles. And employee, if you assign the role called as employee to any user, that employee will have access to employee self-service. Okay. The user will get access to employee self-service. That means in EBS, if you have a responsibility, if you assign the responsibility to the user, that user can navigate to SRS window, right, by default. A standard request submission window in EBS. But in the Fusion, by default, user cannot have access to similar window. Similar to SRS in EBS, in Fusion we have ESS job page. Here ESS stands for Enterprise Scheduler Service. In EBS, standard request submission. Okay, we have SRS window, right? In EBS we have SRS window, standard request submission window. Equal to that, in Fusion we have ESS job page. ESS stands for Enterprise Scheduler Service. Okay, Enterprise Scheduler Service. In EBS, if you assign any responsibility to the user, that user can go to SRS window. Within the responsibility, you may assign, may not assign request group, but still the user can go to SRS window. If any reports access is given to the responsibility through request group, the user can submit, otherwise no. But by default, the user can have access to SRS window. But in the Fusion, by default, user cannot have access to ESS job page until unless employee role is associated with that user. That means employee role will give access to ESS job page, along with that employee self-service related access. That means what user can do, if you assign employee role to the user, user can run the reports. The reason user will have access to ESS job page, user can run reports, and employee user will get access to employee self-service. That means the user will have access to employee records. Employee records means whatever the information organizations allows their employees to access that information. and that employee can raise the requisitions. Requisitions in the sense not business related requisitions. Okay, if employee requires something, that relevant requirements user can raise as requisitions, and employee can book the expenses. That means employee can create the expense reports. So this sort of access can be given to user with the help of employee role. These two are job roles, and this is abstract role. And one point in EBS, to system administrator responsibility, we don't assign anything, right? We don't assign any primary ledger or operating unit and all. But if you talk about payables responsibility, yes, we assign primary ledger, we assign operating unit. If you talk about GL responsibility, yes, the same way we assign primary ledger to GL responsibility. That means the responsibilities which we are going to use to perform the transactions, we have to assign the operating units, business groups, primary ledgers and all. If you take example of system administrator responsibility, we are not going to use the system administrator responsibility to record the transactions. That is only for the purpose of some sort of key setups, responsibility creation, user creation, profile options. Since we are not going to create any transactions within the system administrator responsibility, we don't assign anything to that. The same way, to these three roles also, we don't assign anything. This is only for the purpose of completing the setups. Okay, so application implementation consultant role to perform the setups, not to perform any transactions. Nothing we are going to assign to this application implementation consultant. We assign the anything, it could be primary ledger or business unit or anything, to roles which are related to application specific. If you take example as accounts payable manager or general accounting manager, this role for payables, to record the transactions in the payables, we have to assign the business unit to this role. This role is for GL. To record the transactions in the GL, we have to assign the primary ledger to this role. But these roles are not specific to any application. Okay, these all are job roles only. All are job roles. Again, job roles are classified, the roles which involves in the transactional process and which involves in the non-transactional process. So based on the classification, we can understand to which roles we have to assign something and which roles we don't need to assign anything. So now the point here is we have to understand we no need to assign anything to these roles. The reason, with the help of these roles, we are going to perform the configuration and we are going to manage certain definitions. We are not at all going to record the transactions. So with the help of these roles, we complete all the setups for payables. But to record the transaction, the payables, this role we have to assign to the user. To the same role we have to assign the business unit so that we can record the transactions. So this is what we have to understand when I talk about these roles. Any questions on these, please? There are three primary roles we have to assign to user who is going to act as an implementation consultant. And one more point here, let me complete, then you can just raise your questions. So I'm going to create one user called as ABC and XYZ. I'm creating two users, ABC user and XYZ user. You tell me which user can do the implementation. It's not a great question, but still I'm asking. You tell me, I created two users, ABC and XYZ. Which user can do the implementation?
The user who has application implementation consultant, IT security and employee role.
That's it. We have two users, ABC and XYZ. which user can do the implementation means the which user has access to these three roles, that user can do the implementation. Now tell me, two users has access to these roles. Okay, so I don't need to assign those. Simple point. The ABC user has access to these three roles, and say we assign these three roles to ABC user, and we assign the same three roles to XYZ user also. These two users has access to these three roles. That means that two users can do the implementation. Now my question is, which user can create the supplier sites and site assignments?
Whoever has the procurement agent.
None of the user can create this.
Yeah. You have to have employee. It should be employee user type, not implement.
That is the point. See, two users has access to these roles. Okay, two users has access to these roles. Which user can create the supplier site means which user is employee and procurement agent.
No, none of them.
No, we didn't discuss. So far, we didn't discuss whether these users are implementation users or employee users, right? There's no clue. We are discussing
That is
users. Okay. Two users we have, ABC and XYZ. We didn't discuss ABC user is employee user, XYZ user is implementation user. We didn't discuss anything. Just two users we have. Two users we assign these three roles. These two users can perform the implementation related setups. And who can create the supplier sites and site assignments? Which user is employee user and procurement agent? That user can do this. Now the point is, the XYZ user is employee user. If the XYZ user is employee user, if you convert XYZ user as an employee procurement agent, the procurement agent, this XYZ user can create the supplier sites also. That is the point. That means it can be implementation user or employee user. Which user has access to these three roles, that user can do the setups. And if you want to do the additional setups like supplier site and site assignments, that user should be a procurement agent. If you want to convert any employee as a procurement agent, if you want to convert any user as a procurement agent, before that the user should be a procurement agent. Sorry, user should be employee user. Okay, the user should be an employee user so that you can convert as a procurement agent. Then that user can perform setups like supplier site creation and site assignment. So this is a point we have to understand. When you say ABC user is implementation user, say I created ABC user from security console. Okay, security console. I created XYZ user from HCM. So it doesn't matter who is the implementation user and who is the employee user. Only the point is to which user we are assigning these roles, that user will have a privileges to create all the configuration, all the setups. So in the very beginning of the implementation, only the option is we create a user from the security console, which we call as implementation user, and we assign these roles. And going forward, once we are ready with the business unit and legal entity, this ABC user you can convert as a employee user, and you will be able to complete the remaining setups like supplier site and site assignment. Or else ignore this ABC user as it is, create new user called as XYZ with the help from HCM, and you can treat that user is employee user, you can convert as a procurement agent. So when you talk about implementation user, just for implementation purpose we are creating the user to start with the implementation. That is the reason we are calling as implementation user, not based on the roles we are deciding. Okay, if you are creating user from a security console, that user by default we call as implementation user, but your HCM user, nothing but employee user, also can act as implementation user if you assign these roles. Based on the roles assignment also you can say who is the implementation user. Okay, that means who has the privileges to perform the implementation related configurations. That's it. But from where you are creating, based on that you can decide. That is the first point. Once you create it, based on the roles you can decide. Okay, if you assign the roles to HCM user, who is an employee user, that HCM user also can act as implementation user by holding those roles access. So this is what we have to understand. Any questions here, please?
Lakshman, there is no, I mean, so from HCM also you can assign those job roles, right? Those three: application implementation consultant, IT security, and employee. And from security console also you can do that, right?
Yes.
So, but when you do it from HCM, it should be, is it like mandate kind of thing? Is it should be a mandate employee, or any user can be those three?
Now what happens is, ideally, for any user, we assign the roles from security console only. Okay, the user which you are creating from the security console to that ABC user information will be available in the security console. We assign the roles. What are the user you are creating from HCM? That user information also will flow to security console. Here we do the role assignment. For any user, we assign the roles from security console. That can be implementation user or employee user. The user's information would be available in the security console. You can create from here, and that flows into security console. From security console, we assign the roles.
Lakshman, this application implementation consultant, IT security manager, and employee. These three roles are seeded roles, right?
Seeded, yes. These three are seeded roles.
But still, I can do that from HCM, right? Assignment, those three to a user.
Yes, we have a different options, but you can create the auto role provisioning. Through that, you can do that. Or else, when you are creating the employee user, also you have option. But primarily, the place is security console, which we use for roles assignment. Assigning the
Is it
resetting the password, the other conditions and all you can set up in the security console only. From HCM also you can do that. When you are creating user itself, there is an option called as assign roles. Yes, you can assign the roles.
But security console is a subset of HCM, or
No. So if you want to assign the responsibilities to the user, what we do in EBS?
we go to security user, define, and you assign the responsibility.
Yeah, no, simple point is yes, correct. You can do that from the sysadmin responsibility, right?
Yeah.
The same here, instead of sysadmin, security console.
I think it's still a bit confusing, but I don't know if we do the experiment.
No issues, you can see in the class. Still, if it is confused. Yeah. Simple point is, to any user, if you want to assign the roles, we do it from security console. That's it.
So one question, Lakshman, I have is, so if we assign that application implementation consultant responsibility, so that particular job role has functional setup manager. So would that be across all the modules of the financials?
Not only finance, all the applications which are available within that instance, that will give you the access to entire instance.
It's like a highly privileged kind of role.
Complete environment you can access from there. The same is possible in EBS through sysadmin responsibility, right?
Yeah, but can that be segregated to specific to module like payables?
Yeah,
or, I mean,
only you could see. You can see the segregation only.
Okay. No, because the GL person should not be able to access the payable responsibility setups.
One second. See, we are talking about setups, not transactions. You are talking about transaction part.
No, I'm talking about setup only, Lakshman.
Now I'll tell you.
I'm just telling.
One second. When I talk about that, when you are doing the implementation, you have 5 consultants for finance, for example, for each module, 1 consultant. Can you set the restrictions Okay, can you set the restrictions within the EBS application not to allow someone to not to access some other applications?
Yes.
How you can do that?
And so we assign that setup, I mean, menu, the setup menu. So if you want to do the GL related setups, we can only GL setup related
Correct,
functionalities.
correct. Do you think I'll give you are working on tables, I'll give you the access to only AP responsibility. Will you be fine with that as a consultant? No. You need
No.
access to system administrator responsibility also, right?
Yeah.
When you have a system administrator responsibility, even you are working for payables only, can you access other responsibilities also?
Once you have system administrator, you can access, but
Yeah, you
no,
can.
no, no.
What you can
My
happen?
question is like, no, in the current project which I am here, like we have a different modules and different teams would be implementing. GL would be implemented by a separate team, payables would be implemented by a separate team, and AR would be implemented by a separate team. But the segregation of the setup is separated between the users. So one who is having the GL responsibility would not have the AP setup
Yes,
responsibility.
yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Here, as a part of implementation, if you are working as implementation user or as implementation consultant, you need access to application implementation consultant user. Here in Fusion, what happens is what we don't do in EBS and what we have to do in the Fusion is we have to create the implementation project in the Fusion application. That I'll be covering in the FSM. After completing FSM, if you have a relevant question, whatever you are asking now, we can talk on that. Okay. Here,
Okay.
it's not responsibility concept, responsibility based. But again, one more point here, when you talk about responsibility, so in EBS, when you talk about responsibility, the responsibility consists of setup part and transaction part, right? By default, a seeded menu.
Yeah.
You can segregate, possible, but in the
Yeah.
Fusion, the segregation they given separately. The setups and all you can do with the help of this role. The transactions which you want to perform to specific application they give in the separate roles. That's how they segregate it. Okay. If you assign one role to user, you cannot. It's not like you can do the setups as well as you can perform the transactions. No. For setups, roles are different. This is the role. To perform the setup, this is the role. To perform the transactions, the module specific roles we have. That's how these are different. They segregated transaction roles and configuration roles.
But my only question here is the segregation of setups is specific to module or at application level it is controlled.
Segregation of setups instance level.
Application.
Instance.
Instance. Okay.
When you connect to application implementation consultant, you can do the setups for any application.
Wouldn't that be a conflict?
If you know your responsibility, there is no conflict as a consultant.
Okay.
In EBS, I am giving the access to sysadmin. Say, for example, you are working for one module. You know your responsibility, right? You have to implement which module, you have to do which setups. You are not going to do other module related setups or something else. The same here. Fine. Any other questions here, please? Fine, no questions. So that's all about user. We have to understand implementation user and employee user. So in fresh instance, you cannot start with the employee user creation since employee user required access to business unit and to legal entity, right? Business unit and legal entity. So that is the reason we start with the implementation user creation so that we can start with the setups. And once we are ready with the business unit and legal entity, we can create the employee user separately, or else the same implementation user you can convert into employee user. When we convert implementation user as employee user, the process of conversion we have to provide this BU and LE information. So once you create any user to whom you want to allow to do the setups implementation, so we have to assign these roles. These are the basic roles which are required for consultant. These roles you can assign to implementation user, the user which is created from security console, or else you can assign these roles to HCM user. HCM user means employee user, so that those users can have access to relevant areas. But we are very clear on the point what employee user can do and what implementation user cannot do. That is only the supply related definition. Okay, when you talk about financials, when I talk about procurement, there are many other things which cannot be performed by implementation user. Fine. Say for example, we'll go and create our user and we'll assign these three roles. Then when you start with the implementation related configuration, what points we have to understand? Let's talk about FSM so that we can start with the system. Okay, after discussing about FSM, functional setup manager, directly we can jump into the application and we'll see how to create the employee implementation user, how to assign the roles, and once we're done with that, how to start with the configuration. Before we start with the setups, what are the other points we have to consider, we'll discuss and we'll do in the system. So now let's talk about FSM. FSM stands for Functional Setup Manager. So in EBS we have ASM. What is the use of ASM? Anyone please?
To create ledgers, legal entity.
Yeah, ASM stands for
Accounting Setup Manager.
Accounting Setup Manager. Okay, it is setup manager. Okay, it's a setup manager to perform the setups. We can use this part that too related to accounting. Only accounting related setups you can manage by using this ASM. That means you can create the primary ledger, reporting ledger, secondary ledger, and you can set up the ledger options. You can create legal entities, and there is navigation to connect to the organization definition form. You can create the business units and business groups. That's how you can use ASM. You can access this ASM from GL, but it allows us to do certain setups, but those are very limited setups. But in Fusion we have FSM, Functional Setup Manager. With this Functional Setup Manager, you can do any application related setups. Any application related setups. When you deal with the FSM, okay, say you got access to fresh instance and you created a user called as implementation user, you assign the role called as application implementation consultant role to that user so that you can access this FSM, Functional Setup Manager. Okay, you got access to FSM. Being a consultant, what is our job? What we have to do as a first step? The very first step is here, the point is, when your client takes the subscription from Oracle, Oracle will provide one user ID. If you want to proceed with that user ID, yes, you can use that user ID, or else you can, by using that user ID, by using that user credentials, you may create your own user. That doesn't make any difference. Okay, even whatever Oracle provides that user, to that user they create user, they assign these roles only. Oracle provides the user to the client with these roles access. You can proceed with the same user, or else you can create your own user. When you create your own user, make sure that you are going to assign these three roles. Say you may use Oracle provided user, or you might have created your own user. Ultimately, you will have access to FSM. When you have access to FSM, very first point what you have to do is you have to enable something so that system will allow you to implement the same in the system environment. So we have a different product families, right? Those are like financials. Financials is product family which has some set of modules inside. The same way SCM, and procurement, and we have a projects, we have HRMS. These are the different product families as for EBS, right? EBS, you can see these product families. When I talk about Fusion, almost the names we have as it is, slightly they changed for few areas. Yes, in Fusion also you can see financials as a financials, SCM as SCM, procurement as a procurement, and projects you can see as PPM, project portfolio management. Okay, we have a projects suite within the EBS. The projects in Fusion you can call as PPM, project portfolio management. Within the PPM you can find project costing, billing, resource management, project management, and other applications. And HCM you can find as HRMS you can find as HCM, human capital management. Since they've taken the solution from the different products, slightly they change the naming convention also as per their legacy product. Fine, this is how we have. Now all these, the financials, SCM, procurement, PPM, HCM, as per FSM, functional setup manager, you call as offering. Financials we call as offering, SCM we call as offering, procurement, PPM, HCM, everything we call as offering. So if you call financials as one offering as per FSM in Fusion, within the offering called as financials, we have a different applications or say modules. So we have GL, AP, ER, CM, FA. They are primary modules. So as per FSM, financials we are calling as offering. Within the financials offering, what are the applications or modules, whatever we have, those we call as options. GL we call as one option. The same way, other applications also we call as options. So this is the terminology we use when we deal with FSM. Offerings and options. So when you start with the implementation, very first point is which offerings and options we are going to implement for our client we have to enable. The very first point when you get access to fresh instance is you may create the new user, otherwise you can proceed with the Oracle provided user, but we have to enable offerings and options. We have to enable offerings and options. So what is the scope of the implementation? Okay, what is the scope of the implementation? Based on the scope, we have to enable the offerings and options. Say you are going to implement for your client financials. So you have to enable offering. Again, within the financials, say you are going to implement only GL, AP, and ER. So what we have to do is, you have to enable the offering called as financials, and you have to enable the options called as GL, AP, ER, so that you can do the implementation only for those enabled offerings and options. Okay. So in fresh instance, you don't see as something as enabled. Everything you have to enable, whatever you are going to implement. For that, you should know what is the scope of the implementation. What are the modules we are going to implement for the client. Accordingly, you have to enable. So any question on this point, please? And one more point. If you want to enable additional offerings or options later point of time, yes, you can do. At any point of time, you can do. But without enabling, you cannot start with the setups. Any questions on this, please?
Laxman, if we go for financial offering, so but as part of that, we also use that HCM creation of user, right? Do we need to enable that HCM offering as well?
Correct. See, when you say you are going to implement only financials, even if you are implementing the financials, there are few dependency setups which you have to do from HCM. There are few dependency setups which you have to complete from, say, SCM. But you are not going to implement HCM and SCM. You are not implementing. You are going to implement only financials. What Oracle is doing is, which setups you have to perform from HCM and SCM, when you do implementation for financials, those setups they are giving within the financials only. User creation setup you can see in the financials only. The procurement agent creation setup you can do within the financials. Okay, when you do the setups in the financials, if you want to create supplier sites which are required for payables, you have to create procurement agent. That's what we discussed. The procurement agent setup is related to SCM, but still the setup you can see within the financials. If you want to create the employee user, we have to access HCM, but we are not implementing HCM. But still, the employee user creation setup you can see in the financial. That means if you are going to implement specific offering, to implement that offering, what are the other offering related setups we have to perform? Those they are giving within that relevant offering only. That means the dependent setups also you can find in the same offering. You no need to go to other offerings. Okay, that's how you can find in the system. Fine.
Okay.
Yeah, the dependency setups you can find in the same. Say for example, you are going to implement only SCM. When you are implementing SCM, you may have to perform some setups which are related to HCM and other areas, but you are not going to implement those. So that is the reason Oracle is providing those setups also, the dependency setups to implement SCM, which are not related to SCM, other application, those also you can find in the SCM. That's how we have. Any other questions here, please? Fine, no questions. So just
Laxman,
yeah, please.
regarding subscription and offering, so how it works, like if I subscribe for only financials, I will not be able to enable SCM or any other offerings, right?
No, not like that. So Oracle is giving the flexibility. Even if you subscribe for financials, you could see other offerings and options in the same environment. Okay, same as EBS. In EBS, if you take the license only for finance SCM, when you access the instance, you can see the menus related to other applications. You can configure and you can implement other modules. Where we stuck? If any issue with that specific application or any issue with some other application for which application you don't have license from Oracle, Oracle is not going to help you. The same applicable here. Even if you take the subscription for finance, you will be able to enable HCM, SCM, PPM, CRM and other applications. You can enable and you can implement. If you have any issue when you are using those applications, for which applications you don't have this subscription, Oracle is not going to help you. Even if you implement, there is no use. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, they will allow you to enable and implement, but you can use till you get issue. Once you get issue, you have to stop there only. If any patch application, Oracle is not going to help you. And you may manage sometimes, but instance is going to be in their control. Even they can track this instance, the production instance you are using to run which modules. Everything will be in their control only. They can find out. They do the auditing.
But they must be having some auditing. Right?
Yes. That's true. Fine. Any other questions?
There should be a fusion CRM also, other than these offerings?
CRM also we have. CRM also we call as offering. Yes. So, which we treat as the product families or primary business flows, which are connected to specific area. Those all we call as offerings.
And which offering is stable now among these, which are yet to get stable and which are stable?
So these first 5 you can find as very much stable. Okay, CRM also, but not complete solution. So these 5.
And if you have any issues, still we can log SR with Oracle and Metalink.
Same process.
Do we have support and any all issues are there because it's a new product?
Everything. How you deal with Oracle when you implement or use EBS application, the same process you can implement here also, raising SR and getting some support. But the difference is if any patch application is recommended by global support team, you have to contact Oracle DBA to apply the patch. You have to raise the SR saying that we want to apply the patch on this test environment or production environment. Then DBA people, Oracle DBA people will come into the picture to apply the patch. In case of EBS, our team has to do that patch applications or cloning, etc. But here DBA, Oracle DBA team will do that. That is only the difference. That's it. Okay. Fine. Yeah, please.
Laxman, one question. How often does Oracle allow migration?
Sorry? Your voice is going low, Venkat. Please, you can check with your audio connectivity.
Oh, sorry.
How often Oracle allows what?
How often Oracle allows your custom migrations within any or is there a timeline that they follow?
I guess I got off of the question. Custom migrations, how often they allow? So anytime you can do that. There is no rule for that. Okay. So it's a custom objects you are developing. If the environment is PaaS environment, you will have a full access. All the any point of time you can go on to deploy that custom component which you are developing. And if you want to migrate the entire environment to latest version, that you can make a plan. Very often even you cannot do that. That's again big task. You know, in EBS what we do, we'll just apply the main patches, okay, the mega patches on the test environment. We'll run the pre-upgrade reports and we'll start performing the testing and with everything. Once we identify that bugs and issues, etc., then again we'll just ask the DBA to apply on the production environment. Again they apply the same patches. Again we'll make sure that everything is working. Once users will start using, before that we'll run the post upgrade reports. And again technical people should come into the picture to invite that previous version of the developments into latest version. Any changes need to be done and all. It's again teamwork. So nobody generally plan to do very frequently. Even they may follow just 2 years once, 3 years once. That's how we see the clients in the market. The same approach even the cloud clients also has to follow if they are running the system with the PaaS mode. In case of SaaS, whenever Oracle comes up with a new release, just you have to rise one SR. If you rise SR today, they can convert into latest version by tomorrow. Even they don't take 24 hours time. Fine.
Okay, Laxman.
Yeah. So when you talk about FSM, the very first point is we have to enable the offerings and the options. After enabling the offerings and options, to facilitate the setup configuration in systematic manner in the instance, what we have to do is we have to create implementation project. We have to create implementation project. When you create implementation project, as a part of implementation project, you have to select required offerings and options. Create implementation project by selecting offerings and options. Okay, by selecting required offerings and options as per project scope, you have to create implementation project. So here we know implementation project means, okay, when you talk about implementation project, when you talk about implementation, the project life cycle, we have a inception, right, and we do the planning, we do the execution, we do the monitoring and closing. This is actual project lifecycle management. But as a consultant, will come into the picture only in this execution. Here we do the kickoff of the project. We take the I am writing everything in very high level, not required to understand more detail level, just to understand the current point we are talking of this. Okay, requirement, we gather the requirement, we do the testing, we'll do the setups configuration, maybe in the test environment, and we'll do the testing, and in the we'll just finalize that solution. We'll conduct the CRPs and UATs, and once we freeze the requirement and everything, we do the configuration, the production, right? Production configuration and data conversion, and training to business users, and system will go live. There are many in between, but not required for us. Here 2 points. Organization point of view, this is a project life cycle. Okay, it starts and ends. In between they do the detailed planning and the execution, where we come into the picture as a consultant, and monitoring which will be done by the project manager or someone else, and finally we'll close the project. When I talk about execution, these are the areas which we involve. And out of this execution, what are the setups we do? Okay, it could be any environment, test environment or prod. To manage only this configuration, we use this implementation project. Okay, the implementation project, whatever we are referring here, it is just to manage setups, not to manage this entire project life cycle, not to manage the entire execution management. It is only for the configuration. Don't connect this implementation project to track the cost or billing, same as a PPM. Okay, it is just to manage the setup. With the help of this implementation project, what we can do is which modules you are going to implement and what is the progress of the respective consultant with respect to what area they are allotted, and which area is completed, how many setups are completed, whether financial setups are completed or not. Only setup related tracking or monitoring you can do with this implementation project. If you create implementation project, apart from tracking the status of the progress of setups, the other advantage is you can move the setups from one instance to another instance. Okay, without creating implementation project also you can do the setups. Without creating the implementation project also you can do the setups, but with the help of implementation project, if you perform the setups, easily you can track total how many setups you have to complete, how many are completed, how many are in progress, how many are not yet started. Everything you can track so that you can understand the progress of system configuration with the help of implementation project. And if you have implementation project, the other advantage is with the help of implementation project you can create configuration package. Configuration package means the configuration package can extract the existing setups, the same setups you can move to other instance also. That means with the help of implementation project you can move the setups from one instance to other instance with the help of configuration package option. So this is what we have to understand, the purpose of implementation project. Apart from this there is no usage. Okay, so let me just list out few points, then if you have any questions we'll discuss. So within the function setup manager, we have to enable the offerings and options as a first step. The second step is generally we create implementation project so that we'll be able to track everything. After creating implementation project, you can assign specific offering or specific option. And one more point, the moment you create implementation project, system creates task list. Okay, system creates task list. What does it mean by task list? It's nothing but list of setups. System will list out the setups. Say you created implementation project by selecting financials as offering and option called as AP. Now system will create task lists by listing out AP setups, which setups we have to perform to implement accounts payables. The reason is the implementation project consists of only AP module selection, AP option. In the same way, at the time of implementation project creation, what are the offerings and options you are selecting, accordingly system would create the task list. Each setup, whatever you perform in the vision, we call as a task. They named it as a task. Say you are going to create the payment terms, that is one task. You are going to set up financial options, that is a one task. Okay, so you are going to create invoice, that is a one task. So everything they just classified as a tasks. So what are the modules we are going to implement? For all those modules, what setups we have to perform, everything system would create as a task list. Once system create the task list, we can assign. It's not mandatory. If you want to assign the specific offering or multiple offerings, or specific option or multiple options, a specific task list of setups, a specific task to team members. Okay, once you create implementation project, say you have one resource who are going to work for financials. Yes, you can assign financial offering to that resource, or else to implement financials we have two consultants. So you may assign option called as GL APR to one consultant and CM and FA to another consultant, or else within the AP 10 setups, 10 list of setups you want to assign to one resource. Yes, specific task list you can assign to one resource, or else only one setup you want to assign to one resource, one task. Say for example, payment terms creation you want to associate to one resource. Yes, you can do that. So that's how we can perform the assignments. Okay, again, those are not mandatory, optional. And once the consultants will start doing the setups, they can update the status. Update the status of their configuration. Say the consultant, SCM consultant started doing the setups. They can update the status for the entire offering as a in progress. Say SCM consultant completed all the setups. They can update the status for entire SCM as a completed. From finance side, AP consultant started working on the payables. They can update the status as in progress. Once the consultant complete that AP configuration, they can update the status as completed. When you look at the project, you will be able to see all the information. How much percentage of the project is completed, percentage of the project in the sense percentage of the setups. Okay, how many setups are completed, how many are pending, how many setups are in progress, everything you will be able to track. Okay, the consultants, the team members can update the status. Team members can update the status so that we can track the progress of project, you can say progress of the project. Here project in the sense not the actual project, setups, the list of setups what we have to perform within the system that you can manage by using the implementation project. So this is what we have to do. Enabling offerings and options mandatory. So once you assign this and all, the users will start doing the setups, system configuration. These two are mandatory. Okay, remaining optional. You may create, may not create the project. If you don't create the project, okay, anyway, it is not going to generate the separate task list, and you don't need to assign to the team members. Team members cannot update the progress, and they cannot update the status of the particular task, and you cannot track the progress of the project. So these are all you cannot do. Only the thing is you have to enable the offerings and options, then you can start doing the system configuration. So creating the project is optional, but in almost all the any project implementations, we create the project which facilitate status tracking as well as moving the status from one instance to another instance, which we call as configuration packages. It allows us to create the configuration packages. If you don't have project creation, you cannot do that. So these are primary, but ideally we create the implementation project also. In every project, you may not assign the tasks, you may not update the status, you may not track the progress of the project. Those are quite optional, but very primarily in every project we have to enable, we create implementation project, we'll start doing the setups. So this is what we can do primarily from FSM. There are a few more points which you have to understand that once we get into the application we'll discuss. Any questions on this, please? Hope it is clear what is the meaning of implementation projects within the Fusion. It is not project lifecycle related project. It is not related to project execution related project. It is completely related to system configuration related project. Any questions here, please?
Save those configuration packages?
I didn't get your question, only the voice was very low when you started. What is your question?
Are you going to show us how we save the configuration
packages? I'm going to show how to create the configuration package. Yes, I'll be covering in the classes. Yeah, we'll do that. So any other questions? Fine.
So if you go with the offering financials and options as payables,
yes.
So as mandate, it will also enable the GL related setups, because enterprise structure we need the GL, right, for payables and
correct,
business unit. So those all steps, those all would be enabled as part of the payables implementation.
Yeah, reality, Oracle is not giving enabling GL at the time of project creation. If you pick any one of the, if you enable financials, irrespective of which option you are going to enable, you will get GL part. Okay, that's how we have. By default, you will get GL.
And also one more question I have is like system configuration. They said like in cloud, so it's a sequence of events. If unless you do the prerequisite, you cannot proceed further. Is that a true statement in Fusion?
Tell me one example for that.
One example. I couldn't recollect, but I heard that Fusion is
it is simple, same as EBS only. See, if you are doing some module implementation, we have to follow certain sequence. The similar sequence you can find here. But here you can see which task is mandatory, which is optional, and most of the tasks you can find in the sequence. But before that, we should know to implement payables, what are the mandatory setups. Definitely, the consultant side knowledge is very much important. We should not depend on system, since it is just giving some sort of sequence. Generally in EBS also you see the sequence of setups only, more or less. If you go to setup invoice related setups we have, and if you go to setup payments, payment related setups you have, those also in the sequence. First you will find invoice section only, below only you can find the payment section, that is also sequence. But here everything you can see in the same as a task, that is the reason you can address as a sequence. But in fact, what are the sequence you see in EBS within the responsibility by expanding the submenus? I mean, those the similar manner you could see, but here almost everything are tasks. That is the reason it's more clear to see as a sequence. Okay, but we should know what sequence we have to follow. Here you can find the sequence, but related to specific task list only, not for entire setups. If I'm going to do the payable setup, say for example, I have to execute 20 setups. 20 setups you don't find in the sequence. Okay, if it is related to invoice process related 4-5 setups I can see in the sequence. But again, if I go to payments, in the payment related, that's how you can see. Okay, that these are not that much sequenced. Oracle is not providing, so we should aware of what is sequence we have to follow. But there is some few tasks you can find in the sequence, but not everything. We should know that only will work. Any other questions on today's session or previous classes, please?
Laxman?
Yeah.
Laxman?
Yeah, please go ahead. Venkat, from your side, the voice is not clear. Okay, anyone, please.
This iStore, is it part of SCM infusion or it's a separate iModules are separate?
It's a part of not SCM also. When you talk about SCM, within the SCM we don't have iStore. iStore is part of procurement.
Okay.
Okay. Procurement primarily. If you refer to the procurement module, okay, this all falls under procurement application. iModules.
So all the iModules come under procurement. Okay.
Not all. Just when you talk about SCM, just I taken SCM side, this which are connected with our finance. So I taken iModules. Even you have in the finance also, right? iReceivables, right? Other applications.
Yeah.
Those are there, but
okay.
Those are completely, the separate applications. So those falls under different offerings again.
Okay.
Hello, Laxman.
They are different offerings.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Got it.
Yeah, please.
Hello, Laxman.
Please.
Yeah, here we will cover also the cost accounting, because there is some setup is like
cost
in between
accounting,
financial and SCM.
Cost accounting, receipt accounting are a core SCM area. When we are going to see the P2P and O2C configuration, and we'll be testing the flow. When we do this cost accounting and receipt accounting is not required. For the same flow, if you want to generate the accounting entries, the cost accounting and receipt accounting is not required. Is required to generate the accounting entries. But we are going to run the cycle. We are not going to create accounting. The reason also same. We have to implement cost accounting and receipt accounting. Our course is not more related to SCM finance, so we are not going to touch that. That is a core SCM part. But I'll be covering PO tab. Without PO tab definition, you cannot create the requisition purchase order. That is the reason that we are going to cover, where we have a dependency to execute the P2P and O2C setups process. Those we are going to cover. Yeah. The cost.
Real scenario, like who will be responsible, like for the accounting part, or like
SCM consultant has to create that cost accounting and receipt accounting rules, from where the accounting need to be derived, and how the cost need to be calculated, how that need to be, the accounting generation and transfer to GL. They have to do it, not finance consultant. In every project they do that. Yeah. Any other questions from anyone, please? And one point here, we're done for today. If you have any questions, you can stay back, or else you can drop from the meeting. Okay. Yeah. Now, any questions, please?
Laxman, are you sharing the videos for the last 3 classes, please?
Last 2 sessions we shared with everyone.
Hello. Okay, but I haven't received. This is Vijay from Dubai. I think I emailed you.
Okay, no issues. We'll share it. No worries. Any other questions from anyone?
Thank you. Paritala, yeah, please, thanks.
Any questions from anyone?
Hi Lakshman, Sagar here.
Yeah.
Actually, can we get access to EBS for practice purpose?
No, no, no.
Okay.
So by default, no. But if you want, okay, no issues. You can talk to the team. I'll just inform them to provide the access. But the course is cloud, so by default we don't give EBS. If you want, no issues. We'll arrange it.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I am in touch with your team. They
Okay.
said they need your approval or something.
Yeah, I'll talk to them. No issues. You can get it.
Lakshman, this
Thanks
is
a lot.
Vinod.
Yeah, no.
I just asked for the certification dump, Lakshman.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. We are in the very, very beginning. Still, if you require no issues, I'll do that.
By when we'll get that access, Lakshman, to the ERP?
Sorry?
ERP access, when we will be getting?
Instance access, right?
Instance access, yeah. Yep.
So we not yet started with the instance, right? Still we are discussing, right? In tomorrow's session, we are going to see within the application how to create the user, how to create the implementation project. Okay. So we'll go through all these points. So we'll be using the instance for tomorrow class. The other side, you need the instance to practice the same. You can expect to get instance tomorrow if you are already subscribed.
Okay, and the yeah, and the dumps are, and the previous videos also, right? By tomorrow,
Yeah.
can we get?
Yes. If you want,
okay.
Yes, batch videos. Yes, we can provide all.
Yeah,
we'll do that.
I just want to, if I get, I want to.
Any questions from others?
Lakshman, this is Prema.
Yeah.
I have some payment issues got.
Sorry, it went off. Okay. Yeah, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
I had some payment issues. So can we talk about that after the meeting?
Yeah, sure.
Or
sure.
You or I.
Yeah. We'll connect.
Oh, Lakshman, this is James.
Yes,
I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the payment in general, the course content, and but I wanted your time. Is it possible to give a call, or do you want me to stay online? How is it going to be?
No, James. What we'll do is I'll ask the team to connect the call so that one-on-one we can discuss. Yeah. You are in touch with whom from the team?
Yeah. From the team, I'm in touch with Satish.
Satish, okay. I'll ask him to connect.
Okay. Because I wanted to confirm few things with you before, committing my time.
Okay.
So I wanted to talk to you.
Okay. We'll do that. You can expect the call within 5 to 10 minutes max. 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Lakshman.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Simit, please.
Yeah, hi. I just had a question regarding the GL online exam for Oracle. I think I discussed with you before. So when do you think that I can start studying for?
No, Simit, 1 second. GL online instance, what are you talking about? Instance, normal instance, or?
No. About the online exam, Oracle online
exam. Okay. 1 second.
Able to talk on phone in the evening?
Sorry? Venkat, your voice is not at all clear. Fine. So seems to no questions from anyone.
Laxman.
Yeah.
Laxman, why they made it procurement away from SCM in cloud? Earlier it used to be in the same.
No, not same.
SCM, right? Procurement.
In the SCM, you can see P3 module as a purchasing. When you say advanced supply chain management, this all will come into the picture. So here simply they segregate it as a separate offering. by understanding how that organizations required the areas of module they segregated. That's it.
And if we take this course, pretty much we see the SCM, that order to cash P2P also, right?
Yeah, P2P and O2C, the basic configuration, the basic flow also you can understand.
And if we have to go and implement O2C and P2P, with this we can go and implement?
Implementing in the sense, like if you want to implement P2P O2C, definitely client will be using the complete scope of the purchasing, order management, inventory, right? That you cannot do. For that you have to do definitely SCM course. So by doing this here, whatever you are going to see when you are working on finance, if you want to test P2P O2C flows, okay, or else if you want to resolve certain issues and to understand the connectivity, what basic setups required from this inventory side, order management side, purchasing side, and to test the flow or to resolve the issues, that level of knowledge you can get by going through these classes respective to those cycles. Primarily we'll focus on finance, those areas we are touching, so that it will help you to understand what configuration, if any issues, you will be able to resolve. But you cannot implement complete SCM by connecting which is connected with these flows. See, a simple example, if we talk about purchasing, we have a different type of requisitions, different type of purchase orders. In our classes, I'll show you how to create requisition, how to create the purchase order, how to create the receipt. Okay. So we are not going to cover all type of requisitions, all type of purchase order, all type of receipt routing methods. Okay, we are not going to see. There are many inventory transaction types within the inventory, but we are not going to touch all those things. Hardly will create receipt, PO based receipt. We are not going to see miscellaneous receipts. Okay, intra transfers, the plannings, minimax planning, different planning methods, whatever we have, we are not going to see. There are many. We are not going to cover. That is not our part. That should be handled by a SCM consultant. Fine. Okay, then that's all for today. We'll connect tomorrow same time and we'll just work on the application, user creation and project. We'll go through FSM, how to enable the offerings, options and relevant information. So thank you all. Have a good day and good night. See you tomorrow. Thank you.